Hi, this will continue our series of videos on creating a shopping cart system with JavaScript. In our last video, we got most of the system working. We've created a cart, we've got an add item function, we've got a show item function, we've got a function that gets the quantity and returns it, and we've got a function that calculates the total price of the cart and then returns that value. And then we've called on our functions a few times here to test it, and then we've called on show items to print the shopping cart to the console, right? And we can see it here. So this is working pretty good. We have a couple functions to write still before we can get into the user interface. Looking at the example cart here, you can see I can add an item to the cart, and here I've got one new item in the cart, and if I click the plus button, I've got two new items, right? Or three or four or six, and I can click the minus button to remove an item, right? And I can remove an entire item by clicking remove. So we need to translate these buttons into functions in code, and then we can call those functions, when we create the user interface, we can call it from the buttons that we create. So let's talk about this for a minute. Let's make a thingy, and we'll add one of those to the cart. So here I added one thingy, right? And you can see it shows up with a quantity of 1 and a price of 99 cents. I can add a new thingy, right? Now I've got 2, or I can click this plus button to increase the quantity, right? So that would be adding a new item. I can also remove one item, right? So that decrements the quantity by 1. The thing is, if the quantity gets to 0, the item should be removed, right? And if I add an item, and I add a few of these, right? Maybe I want to remove the entire item and all of the quantity, and that would be this button here, right? So let's think about how we're going to implement that. Quickly, our code is getting pretty long. I'm going to put a comment here, add item. I like to have a comment heading each function, right? And sometimes I like to even put a kind of just a line with a bunch of hyphens on it, right? Like this, and then I can see like this function begins here, and then maybe it would be clear if we put a line here. One of the problems you can have is if you lose track of these curly braces, you can be placing code within a block where it's not supposed to be, and then it'll run at the wrong time or give you some unexpected results, right? So it really helps if you use these comments to your advantage to arrange and label the code that you have. So I'll do a little bit of that right now, and now I can see kind of that my code is a little easier to read here. And this is kind of our test zone down here. This is where the test code begins, right? Okay, let's talk about removing items, okay? So why don't we make a function called remove item. We've got add item, right? So there we go. So usually with functions, what we want to do is we want to ask the question, what is the input, right? And so that's like the parameters that you send into the function, and then what is the output? And that's what the function returns, right? You can see the get total function takes no input, but it returns a string, right? It returns the total formatted as a string. This toFixed function takes a number as a parameter, an integer, and then it returns a string, which is a formatted number, right? Get quantity takes no parameters but returns a number, right? Show items takes no parameters and doesn't return anything, right? So if we look at every function in that way, like add item takes a name and a price, and it doesn't return anything. Actually, sometimes it returns, but it returns nothing, right? Okay. So, if we look at every function in that way, we can, before we begin writing it, we can consider like happens within the function, right? And what kind of things the function would need to do its job. So here I've got remove item, and remove item needs to know which item to remove. Currently we're kind of using the name of the item to determine, like, what it is, right? So in our case we can never have two apples each with a different price. Like, the name is the thing. If we made like a more complex system, maybe we would have an ID number or like an SKU number for every item, and that would make the item unique. So you could have two items maybe with the same name and a different price, but they would have unique SKU numbers, right? But our system is a little simpler than that for right now. So we're just using the name. So I can identify an item by name, and then I can remove it. So let's give that a try. And there's a few ways we can do this. I'm going to stick with the loop method because it's what we've been using in the rest of our code. So essentially my goal here is to call remove item, pass the name of the item in, and then loop through our array of items in the cart and compare the name of each item to the name that we passed into the function. And if the names match, then I want to remove that item from the array. Well, this will remove an entire item, like all the quantity, everything, right? Just one row will be gone. We'll talk about removing or decrementing the quantity in a moment, right? After we solve this one. So maybe I need to start with my standard looping code here. And I'll just do this the same way we did it everywhere else, right? So we'll say, let I equal 0. Let's loop while I is less than the length of the cart. And then I plus equals 1, we'll increment that with every loop, right? So now let's write our if statement. So I'll put the whole if block here. And then what I want to do is I want to say, cart item I, right? So that's one of the objects, right? Should look like this right here. So it should have a name, a price, and a quantity. And then I want to just look at the name. So I'll put .name here, and we'll use the triple equal, and we'll compare it to the name that we passed into the function. So this name is the property on the object at this index within the array, and this name is the name that we passed into the function. So even though they're spelled the same, these come from different places. Like, this doesn't have anything in front of it, right? So it's this one, and this has the dot here, so it says it belongs to an object in here, right? So if these two things match, then we want to remove that item from the array. So how do we remove something from the array? Well, cart is our array, and arrays have a method called splice. Okay, it's I don't know if it'll show me this here. Oh yeah, there's our code hints, right? So splice, it takes a few parameters and it does a few things, right? This is actually a kind of a complex method, right? We give it a starting index, so that's a number. So that's where we want to begin our splicing operation. And then we give it a delete count, okay? So the delete count is how many items to remove, okay? So we can say start at index 1 and then remove, 3 items, and it would start at 1 and then remove the next 3, okay? And then splice actually does a little bit more because you can add things to the array after you splice. So it can, remove and add things, but we only need to remove something. So we'll just use it in that way. So what we need to do is we need to remove something at the index, and we found that, index I right here, the name at index I matched the name that you passed in to remove. So we can say, let's start at index I, and then the delete count is like how many items to remove. And so what I want to do is I want to remove 1 item. Okay, so I've got cart, splice, this is my array, I'm going to splice it. I want to start at index I and remove a single item. Okay, now remember, our items in the cart, if we look at them by name, all the names are unique. So if we've removed this item, there won't be another item with that name, the way that our system is working. So at that point, there's no point in continuing to loop through the rest of the array, right? So we'll just call return here, and we can make our program a little bit more efficient by stopping early, right? Let's give that a test, right? So here I have some apples, some oranges, some opinions, some apples, another frisbee. You know, that frisbee was awfully expensive. Let's try and remove it. So I'll say remove item, and what I'll want to do is I'll want to remove the frisbee. Now the string comparison is, you know, it looks for an exact match, so we got to make sure this name is spelled the same as the one here. So if I look at my code previously, you should see apple, orange, opinion, and frisbee, and if I refresh and run the code again, it should show the same list but no frisbee at the bottom, right? So let me save that and run it. Oh, there we go. So we got apple, orange, and the frisbee was removed. And actually, you know, we can kind of double check to see if this remove item is working by calling show item first and then calling remove item afterwards, and that'll be kind of a guarantee that maybe the system is working. So if I refresh it here, you can see that I've got you know, kind of put this in a weird order there, but you can see the frisbees on the first one, and then maybe it's doing this because I don't have enough room in here to show the whole list, but you can see I got frisbee here, and then the total is $15.49, and then I have 6 items in the cart. Remember, I had 7 before, right? And then the frisbee is removed on this one, right? And that the price is now $5.57 because the $9 is gone, right? So anyway, so hopefully that's helpful to you. We've got remove item. And then here's your challenge. Let's imagine that we want to only remove 1 from the quantity, right? When you call remove item. Try and do that, right? And that'll be a challenge for you. And we'll tackle that in the next video. Okay, thanks for watching.